Hi, folks. Steven here. So, this is going to be another one of our discussions. This is an intergenerational episode. This is going to be our discussion of the music of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the most recent Smash Bros. Game. Although I suspect they are getting to work on whatever is coming next, whether it's an expanded version of this or whatever. Now that Kirby Air Riders came out last year. Over on the screen here, so it is a bit of a spoiler for the ending, I suppose, of Pokopia if you have not been able to pick up that game and haven't stumbled across some other way. But yesterday on the blog, I posted, so you're the playing in that game as a Ditto, and you sort of imitate your original trainer. And I made a little joke here. At the end of the game, I won't say exactly how, but you do find out that your other trainer may still be out there. And so I joked, well, gee, what if they sent back a message? And so here we have Professor Tangrowth. I found the font that's used in the game and purchased a copy of it. So it looks like they sent back a CD. You should take a listen and find out. So what this actually is, and I encourage you to take a look at the PokePress blog, pokepress.blogspot.com. Yes, this is another In Excess spoof, or an adaptation is more what I was going for here. It's not supposed to necessarily be funny, but you can sort of see it out here. And I even made a observation about Pokopia's soundtrack and a similarity it has, which you can see scrolling by here. But that is a fun little thing that I put together. I've had the idea for a very long time, and at first I thought I would, when Pokopia was announced, I was afraid, oh, geez, there's no way I'm going to tie this in here. And, well, I kind of shoehorned it. So that is kind of fun with that. I'll try and put a link in the video description afterwards, but I wanted to make sure folks knew that. As far as stuff I am getting up to, I do have one more Anime Milwaukee interview, and then I have a few more things. As far as the podcast feed, it'll either be Anime Milwaukee plus some of the Stern pinball stuff in the next episode, or it will be our discussion of, let's see, I think it is, Pokemon Go. I almost had that episode finished before Anime Milwaukee and so on. But this channel is the priority over the podcast in a lot of ways. In terms of stuff, because stuff gets posted here first, and that's kind of the priority. But I should hopefully have more stuff to do over this month, leading up to NAIC and Chicago Go Fest, which I will also be at next month. And why don't you go ahead and let us know where you're at with your show and whatnot.
Yeah, I run Pikapi Podcast, a show that goes through all of Ash's adventures through the main Pokemon series and that of his friends. I am currently doing a couple episodes of Pokemon Chronicles, catching up with Casey and Richie and a man who no one's entirely sure who he is and why his name is what it is if he's nobody important. So
I think I know which one you're talking about there. That's
yeah, we've met Silver.
Yes, very, very strange, interesting naming convention there. But yeah, so that's what she's up to. Reminder, she does an episode-by-episode podcast of the anime. We started these discussions back talking about the ending themes of each movie. Still no word on anything in there, although we will be talking about some video game movies in a discussion segment of this episode. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get this started. Anne, are you about ready to go? I'm going to turn on the recorder here.
Yes, I'm good.
All right, looks like my levels are fairly good as well. So leave a little bit of a pause and I'll do our introduction. Let me go ahead and punch up our notes. But if you heard our other Smash Bros. Discussions, this is very good, similar to those. Hi, I'm Steven Reich here at the PokePress Studios in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm on the phone with Anne from Pikapi Podcast. And in our intergenerational break, we're doing an episode here on the music of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate for the Switch. So, as of right now, this is still the most recent Smash Bros. Game. It came in December of 2018. It was one of the big holiday games along with Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, which we do not consider a side game, by the way. It was made by basically the same people as the 3DS and Wii U games, Bandai Namco and Sora Limited. And how much do you remember about the release leading up to this?
This is kind of the point where, like, Super Smash Bros. Games kind of start to blur together for me. It's like, oh, they have a new one. It's a game that I typically, at this stage, don't own, but I play a lot with friends who have it. The big thing I remember is I believe this is the one where they unlocked Sora as a playable character from Kingdom Hearts, right?
Yes, that's why you'll see Disney on the copyright line of this one.
Yeah.
So,
and I run for Kingdom Hearts like there is no tomorrow.
yeah, this one they tried everything they could from the prior versions, including characters, stages. They got all the characters, not quite all the stages, but yeah, like it wasn't. It's a different position than pretty much all the other previous games. It wasn't like the original game was obviously the new thing. Melee came in about 2.5 years later, and that was a big deal for the recently launched GameCube. Brawl there was a big gap between that, about 6 or 7 years between that and Melee, so it was coming back there. And then 3DS and Wii U, there was at least some hope that it did help. It was not the game to really save the Wii U. So, but none of that was really in play. By the time you got to 2018, yes, the system had been around the Switch for a little under 2 years at that point. It was late 2018 versus an early 2017 system launch. But by that point, it wasn't trying to save anything. It was just people were expecting it. But it wasn't the same playing field, so to speak, as the prior games in the series. We knew it was coming, and we were excited that we were going to bring so much stuff in, and boy, did they ever. But it wasn't. We weren't expecting any huge new mechanic stuff. We'll talk in our game discussion about what they did bring in, what they did sort of tweak a little bit here, but certainly more iterative than the other Smash Brothers entries, I would say. As far as the music, well, as with pretty much all the Smash Bros. Game, other than maybe the first one or two, this one does not have a definitive style. Not really in there. Although the Pokemon, especially the new stuff, seems to hew a certain way. We'll talk about that. But there's a pretty good variety because of the large number of franchises and stuff. Tends to be more energetic music, obviously. Being what it is, going to be up to, I think, 8 players at once fighting game if you want to go that far. But we did what we usually do here, since starting with Brawl, what we've done is we've picked 2 Pokemon songs that are new to this version of the game and 1 non-Pokemon song that we want to talk about. My picks were Battle Lorekeeper Zinnia, Battle Island Kahuna, and Cross Your Heart, which is a song from sort of the Castlevania franchise. It's from Haunted Castle, which is sort of part of that franchise and sort of not. We'll talk more about when when we get there. Anne, what were your picks for this game?
Yeah, I picked the Duck Hunt medley, the Battle at the Summit, and the Gladion battle. I know he's called Gladion. I just prefer to think of this boy as the long-lost Eevee evolution, okay?
Yeah, but we'll talk about each of those. We're going to start with the Pokemon songs, though. We'll start with one of mine. This is Battle Lorekeeper Zinnia. So the Smash Brothers for 3DS and Wii U had X and Y stuff, but Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire was not out yet when that game came around. So stuff from there, including Zinnia's battle theme, who, of course, was a new character in the Delta episode of those remakes. I know who she is, obviously, but I didn't get a chance to really encounter her in Oras, actually. Because she was... I didn't get that far. I don't know that I ever actually finished. I think it was Omega Ruby. Kind of sad there. But she does have her own battle theme when you find her. And just so I know, what was your experience with Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire? Did you get to her part of the game?
I did not get to play that one, no.
All right, but I do know her from some of the animated stuff they've had her in, and also Pokemon Master, so I know who she is. As far as this song, This arrangement was done by Shota Kageyama, who you have heard numerous times. He's been an on and off worker within the Pokemon franchise, both in the games and in the anime a little bit. I think he did some work on Secrets of the Jungle on the there, and he shows up every now and again on various things that we cover here. So he pops in and out. I don't know that he actually works for Game Freak proper, but he is a consultant, I guess. As far as the song itself, this is very much a strings and guitar anthem, and I think, at the very least, I think the electric guitar and strings, at least some of that, I think, is live or very well synthesized, I must say, if they went through all that effort there. And I really like the way the two instruments combine and flow together, and really enjoy this treatment of this theme. And what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, well, actually, I kind of disagreed when you said earlier that like this whole soundtrack doesn't really have a theme, because I feel it very much does. It's very electric guitar heavy along with strings and orchestrals, and it has a very symphonic metal quality to it. What I like about Lord Keeper Zinnia is, like I said, like I'm almost 100% sure that electric guitar is played live, because it's going so great, and it's got some good subdued bass sounds, and it feels very emotive, the strings. Like it almost feels vaguely like a Victorian drama, like we're running along the cobblestones in kind of a Dickensian world. So it's very unique and not as in your face as some of the battle themes that Pokemon has.
Excuse me. I suppose there is a lot. Certainly in the Pokemon area, like I said, with the new ones, I think those definitely hew towards symphonic metal, and so does my non-Pokemon pick, I suppose. A fair bit in there. But yeah, I think that's a fairly fair assessment of this one. Really one of the more interesting ones, and that was why I picked it. And let's go on to your first pick. This is Battle Gladion, or Gladion, however you want to say it. This was arranged by Manami Kiyota, who I think is best known for her work on the Xenoblade series. We may have mentioned her before in one of our other discussions. She may have come into Pokemon's orbit somewhere else. But anything you wanted to add about her?
Not about her, no. She's, just a famous video game composer. And as you say, especially on like these collaborations like Smash Bros. And the like, has, again, just kind of orbited the galaxy that is the video game composing world.
All right. Well, what stuck out to you here that made you pick it?
This is the funk of this all. Like, just fits my little alt child. There's something very 80s about the synth lead, and again, it's got some electric guitar in there with it, but all the filters, definitely all the synths. It sounds very 80s anime closing theme. Like this could play as the closing to like Spaceship Captain Yamato or something. It's got like the very live sounding trumpets if they're synthesized. It's been done very well, and it just has I don't want to say city pop because that's not right, but like again, just kind of 80s era anime Japanese style to it, where it's combining the synth with the electric guitar in such a way that's very energetic but of a time.
Yeah, that sounds. I can't comment too much. I haven't seen too much '80s anime, so I can't fill you in there. But what I put down actually has orchestral backing, as a lot of these tracks do, and then a quizzical synth, which I think is largely derived from the character's personality in Sun and Moon. He's a little older than Lily, and I think has a bit of a, I don't know about angst, but certainly a figuring myself out teenager vibe with type null and whatnot there, Silvally, that line. And I think that definitely comes through here. So that was kind of my observation on this one. Anything else you wanted to say about this particular arrangement?
No, like he had a good theme in Sun and Moon. Like I just love how it's adapted here. Like again, it just feels very anime to me, and I like it.
All right, well, let's go on to my second pick. This is Battle Island Kahuna. Let's see, this was arranged by Yasuaki Iwata, no relation to the late president of Nintendo Company Limited, as far as I know. But this is, well, based on what I looked up, he no longer works at Nintendo's proper. at the very least. But he did work on Breath of the Wild and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, so presumably some of the additional DLC tracks that were added in there, which is a good pedigree of those two games, certainly.
Yeah, there's some good tracks in Breath of the Wild.
This track is obviously the Kahuna Battle theme from Sun and Moon, adapted in here. It has, again, orchestra and electric guitar, so a lot of that here. Structurally, one thing I wanted to note is that it has a bit of a showy quality, which I've noticed in a fair number of Smash Brothers tracks over the years. And by that I mean, like, some of them are explicit medleys. We'll be going into that a little bit later. But what I do notice is that there are very clearly defined sections in this one where it goes from one instrumentation to another. And, some stages in the Smash Brothers games have definite phases they go through every 30 seconds to a minute on there, where the arrangement, where the layout, I should say, will switch around and different elements will come in there. And I think that they maybe do these sometimes to fit in with that. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know. Anne, what were your observations?
Yeah, I would definitely say this is one where the different movements are much more segmented than some of the others. They don't flow quite the same way. Like, there is a very marked difference from that first section, which is a bit more subdued with like an oboe-like sound or a clarinet playing very low, and the bass line and all that is very prominent. And then it shifts into a section that is almost like jazzy. So like there's a hard switch that is not bad necessarily. It's just much more noticeable as it switches between movements than some of the other tracks we've talked about.
And that's why I kind of put showy. It seems a bit like a curtain call quality to it for like a thing there. So that was what kind of struck me about it. I think I might, not that any of these are bad songs. I rarely ever pick a song that I think is outright dysfunctional. But I think going back for this one, I think the Gladion theme I like a little bit more than this one, despite picking this. But in any event, let's go on to your second pick, and this is Battle at the Summit, also from Sun and Moon. What sort of caught your attention here?
Yeah, so it feels like I'm battling on Mount Olympus, like the way it just swells that orchestra under the standard Pokemon riff, and that little delay on that first little dun 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 da 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 is really quite deliberate and good. There's these little flute riffs that go crazy, some soft strings, and then like 30 seconds in, the electric guitar comes in, and it is amazing. If like my first pick was an anime closing, like this is an anime opening here. The guitar, it's soloing, it's guitaring all over the place. It's just a very dramatic and joyful theme. I like quite a bit.
Yeah, and I should mention this is another Shota Kageyama track as far as the arrangement goes. Unfortunately, we don't have full, if there were live instruments, who played those and stuff like that, which is too bad. My note on this is that there are some parts of it that feel very open, which track is where they wanted to go with it. Obviously, upgrading from the 3DS, which has a decent sound chip and sound system in it, to the Switch is a bit of an upgrade. And I think they were able to do a little more than that. But those were the things I noticed. And anything else you want to say about this track?
No, I think I said it.
Yeah. So. Let's go on then to our third picks, which are both from outside the Pokemon franchise. So, mine is Cross Your Heart, which is from an arcade game called Haunted Castle, which is sort of a Castlevania game. It was made by Konami. It launched, I think, around the same time as the first or second Castlevania game on the Famicom/NES. And there was a remake of this actually not too long ago. I think it's part of the Dominus, the DS collection of Castlevania games that came out a year or two ago. I could be wrong about that. It might be on something else. But in either case, it was remade because it is a very difficult arcade game. But it is sort of like you fight. I don't know if it is technically Dracula, but you definitely fight a vampire at the end of the game there in the haunted castle and so on and so forth. Let's see. The person behind this arrangement is Takeshi Kuramochi. Unfortunately, I did miss looking at what some of his other work is in there. But as you may have guessed, one reason I picked this is that this is a song that around the time this game came out, I used in an episode of my radio show from 8 to 64. So I have heard it quite a bit since this game has been out for quite some time. And it is a fantastic track. It's got electric guitar, and it's also got some punctuated voice lines, basically, with chorus. I'm not sure, like, it's not super intelligible. It might be Latin, or it might be just, like, random choir sounds or something like that. But the way it punctuates a lot of the lines on there is really, really a lot of fun. And sorry, I've been at the mouth for a minute or two there. What were your sort of reactions to this one?
Oh, I love this choir. I love feeling like I'm about to be murdered in a gothic manner by a vampire. Like this is so dramatic, and like of all the tracks we've talked about, the most fitting the symphonic metal theme. Like this is taking me back to like my college days when I was really into that sort of thing, and like it sort of feels very Nightwish and Dragon Force had a baby sort of music. It's so fun. This is an amazing track.
Yeah, really love it. Obviously Castlevania, Konami, obviously Snake was in the Brawl game, bringing the Castlevania series, brought in some great opportunities there. But definitely give that one a listen if you have somehow not heard it. Now, Anne, your non-Pokemon pick was the Duck Hunt medley. Now, this is a new one. There was one in 3DS and Wii U, since that's where the Duck Hunt dog and, duck became a playable character in that one. But this is a new one for Ultimate. What do you want to tell us about this one?
Yeah, so I picked Duck Hunt because I used to really quite love the original one, that crunchy Duck Hunt medley using, like, a lot of the sounds from the games, the duck quacks and the dog barks, and like really sticking to the limited sound profile and the static of it all. The new version is so interesting because it melds those classic sounds with, again, this electric guitar, the symphonic metal of it all. Like the beat is so driving, like a metal song. And it doesn't sound near as crunchy as the Wii U version, but it's brighter. Like I said, very Dragon Force-esque. Like I feel like I could meld this with Through the Fire and the Flame, and it's just got that same energy to it that you don't expect from a game like Duck Hunt to inspire.
Yeah, and as far as who worked on this is Maki Kurioka, is what I've got down here. Now, she appears to be an in-house composer for Konami, judging by the fact that she's worked on Metal Gear Solid, some Yu-Gi-Oh games, most recently, I think, Zone of the Enders. So definitely spent some time over there. I put down this as a quirky synth. There's parts of it that sound very much like a ballpark organ. Yeah. And I guess I should mention also the original Duck Hunt soundtrack for the Famicom/NES game was done by Hirokazu Tanaka way back in the day. So some Pokemon pedigree there anyway. But I did kind of, as you kind of expect, this one kind of darts around all the place, which is sort of a bit of the reflects the gameplay of certainly the original Duck Hunt. What else? Anything else you wanted to mention about this one?
Yeah, I think the contrast is really interesting. Like I definitely feel like maybe it's cheating to have included this in my pick, but like I only appreciate this updated melody because of what the Wii U version brought. So I definitely would encourage people to listen to both and compare. Like, again, that might be cheating of me that it doesn't stand on its own, but I do think like part of the interest of this track is how it compares to the one that came before.
There's definitely an aspect there. Obviously, Duck Hunt really only has a few jingles and whatnot in there,
Yeah.
So it's a bit. It has more music than, say, the Game and Watch series, which, other than the compilations, is mostly just bleeps and bloops. But so let's kind of talk about overall. Obviously, there were a lot of tracks that we didn't get to. There were about 8 or 9 new Pokemon tracks in there, and obviously a ton of other stuff. But there's a couple observations I want to make here. First of all, as far as I could see in the sound test, all the new Pokemon tracks are battle themes. Whereas in previous ones we've had route and city themes that they've done interesting stuff with. This one is all battle themes, and I don't know if that was an intentional choice or just what got picked or stuff like that. But Anne, did that catch your attention as well?
It is a little surprising because on the one hand, I can see like them wanting to choose the battle themes because it is more energetic, and there does seem to be, again, like a very energized style to the soundtrack overall. But like there are a lot of interesting city themes or route themes going on in like specifically Sun and Moon that have a lot of character. I imagine Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire as well. And it's surprising. It's surprising that it happened randomly. It almost feels like it would have had to be deliberate. Oh, Earthbound.
Yep, we got a little comment here. I always like to bring these things in. Just a quick one from RuneGate 6390 talking about the Route 209 from Diamond and Pearl and Snowman from Earthbound. Yeah, like I said, even going back to 3DS and Wii U, there were like 1 or 2 route themes that were based in there, and I do know that back when the Pokemon soundtracks were on iTunes up until about a year or two ago, I assume they're migrating over to Nintendo Music at some point for the main game soundtracks that they used to have on iTunes. You could see what the most popular tracks were, and for the most part, they were the battle theme. So I'm not sure if this was a research-based type of thing there, but like there are some tracks that would obviously be very difficult to make a Smash Brothers appropriate track for. But like I'm sure someone could do something interesting with an unwavering heart.
Right.
Unwavering emotions, as you may also know it. That would be an interesting task for someone, but there are legitimate good ones based on actual places rather than actual battle themes. There was an Ends Castle arrangement, if I remember correctly, in Smash 4. And I don't know, it's possible also that one thing I want to suggest is that some folks were, because there were so many new franchises here, both in the base game, there was Castlevania, which is a big one, as well as a number of other ones that were new, and also a bunch of DLC ones, many of which were new and not in there. That maybe some folks spent more time on working on those and were more attracted to those. The other thing I have to consider is storage space, because this game, its file size is roughly on par with the Wii U version of Smash 4. It's about 16 to 19 gigabytes. But with more characters, more stages, and more everything else, maybe they were limited on how much, particularly with, pre-recorded audio versus synthesized in-engine music. Either of those points, do you agree, disagree, have your own, Anne?
Well, I think you would know a lot more about the technical side of these systems and the games than I would. So if you say it, I will believe you. But that does sound like it makes sense.
Well, one thing I noticed, it does seem like a few of the tracks have a little bit of compression artifacts that they maybe should have used an extra 16 or 32 kilobits per second on some of those to smooth that out. But maybe they had to get the file size down. I forget how much of the like cutscenes are pre-recorded video versus in-engine and stuff like that. But it's a meaty game. Apparently, like a lot of the models and stuff and all the animations and things like that and textures have a big chunk of that as well. So there's only so much you can cram in. So we'll see how, but that is a consideration. And like I said, I do wonder, especially with some of the heavy hitters of some retro friends. We had in the DLC. There's Hero from Dragon Quest. Like I said, there's Simon, and I think Richter is the other one, the other Belmont from Castlevania. People made a good a deal that they got all of the Captain N game characters into the game. We got Mega Man, we got Kid Icarus, Pit. We got Simon Belmont. All of the game characters pretty much are in there as playables from the hero side, at least.
Nice.
So, and maybe people were more interested, especially since they had all new music for some of those series because they had not been in Smash. I don't know. But I do feel like the Pokemon entries, they're not bad. But I think some of the other entries, other series, some of the newer ones, both in general and to the things, may have gotten a better shake. I don't know. Certainly not a bad soundtrack, but you do kind of wonder there.
It's hard to say. I really did like the Gladion one.
Yeah, like I said, I think those two, the first one I picked and the second one, they're certainly the two best of the new Pokemon tracks. So it's hard to say. But like I said, this is a huge soundtrack, both old and new, and there's only so much we could certainly cover in there. So if you think we missed something, go ahead and give us a comment on one of these videos, or you can drop us an email, pokepress@gmail.com, or you can do @Pokepress on Blue Sky, which is where I do most of my social interaction stuff. All right. Well, for our discussion topic, we're talking a little bit about adaptations in this one, in part because we're recording this about a month after the Super Mario Galaxy movie was released. And have you had a chance to see that? I saw it on opening Wednesday on that one.
I have seen it. It's cute.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with some of the criticisms on there because, whenever you have these adaptations, video games have always, especially for the last 30-some years, have been under a great deal of scrutiny. You can argue the live-action Mario movie from '93 had a lot to do with that, and its underperformance with critics and audiences. But there's always this discussion about, with adapted media, particularly games. I think books are less prone to this. But particularly games in regards to, there's an audience that's familiar with the franchise and the underlying material, and an audience that isn't, and you kind of have to, judge both of those a little bit differently. And with the new one, I mean, the critics have pointed out there's not as much of a character arc or story. Like, there is a story, there's a series of events. But as far as like the characters, they feel like could have done a lot more with that, and I kind of do agree. I would have liked to have seen more with the Bowser and Bowser Jr. relationship, and paralleling that with the Rosalina, spoiler alert, Peach, not that she's in the movie, but and also the Lumas. Both of those have, spoiler alert again, family aspects to them, and I wish they had drawn more parallels there, and I think a more tightly written movie might have been able to do that. It is, however, does have a lot of those references in there to a lot of Mario stuff. We actually get to see, we'll talk more about this in our game discussion, because one of them comes up as a spirit in several of them actually in Smash Ultimate, but we get to see Mouser and Wart in the movie there in a scene, the Super Mario Bros. 2 Doki Doki Panic characters. So that's interesting, but we've always been, we've all had movies where we've been on opposite sides of this one, where we've seen a movie that we were very familiar with the underlying source material, but maybe critics weren't, and we've also been to movies where we didn't know a lot about it, and those are both valid perspectives. But what I found sometimes is with the not familiar perspective, and this was a thread, I think I was talking actually to Little Karibo, nothing against the guy or anything like that, but we were on a different wavelength, and I don't think we were connecting too well. But I was talking to him and some other folks about how sometimes the non-insider reviews can come across so negative that it almost seems like they actively resented the franchise almost. I don't know. So, and I'm talking at the mouth there. Of what I've said so far, what are your kind of thoughts there?
Well, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not sure where you were going with the last comment, but like, I do agree. Like, sometimes when we are close to a thing, we feel more critical of it. Movies is like a tough one for me, because specifically with movies, like, I don't like to hate watch anything. So when I go to the movie theater, I go in like Mr. Darcy. Like, I'm not just willing, I'm not just eager, I am determined to be pleased, and I always have a great time at the movies. And it takes me like several months to like put on the critical thinking, college trained media literacy brain and like start picking it apart. But there are some franchises that I'm very close to, and that is a bit more immediate. And certainly things I have, like, trying to think of one that has, like, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, when that movie came out, like, because that is something very near and dear to my heart, and I'm very educated about that franchise. I had a lot of criticisms that came out the bat, but and sometimes being fans, we use the internet as a way to express our knee-jerk reactions without thinking about how we would express them if other people were right next to us and we said them out loud, if that makes sense. So I definitely see that, like, sometimes our criticism that can be valid and constructive sometimes can come out more like vitriol. Um, but, like, again, that is just unfortunately part of life and part of making art, is that um, even people who are very close and very knowledgeable about a franchise may make a movie where that proves that they see that same property very differently from you, and that is also valid, because once you put something out into the world, a piece of art, and give other people permission to adapt it, even if you don't give them permission, it's just going to adapt. People are going to see it differently. People are going to put their own spin on it, and it is going to change. And part of life, unfortunately, is like trying to navigate, like, how much of that change is, like, can I roll with, and how much of it, like, is offensive to me? How much should I be?
I suppose, but if we're talking about, like, the Super Mario Galaxy movie, I mean, it seems like people who were familiar with the franchise, well, they certainly saw a lot they recognized in there. The movie has almost nonstop references of varying types to the source material. And the critics, those who were, as well as some fans of the franchise, wishes it had a little more, maybe more meat on it and less of that. There was a similar criticism against some of against both of the live-action Five Nights at Freddy's movie, including the sequel that came out last year, that it was heavily packed with references and light on maybe story elements. That was actually one of the things I think people liked about the, particularly the second and third Sonic movie and the Detective Pikachu movie, is it seems like they had a better balance there. So, yes, Anne, there is definitely a case of people who are fans of the franchise with, the Mario Galaxy movie and whatnot, having criticisms of the movies when they came out. But this discussion was more from the idea of people who are not familiar with it. And you remember with the first couple Pokemon movies, when those were in wide release, you'd get folks who were like, I've described some of those reviews from that era as honest, but not necessarily fair. And I think there's a case for that, saying that that's the case, because yes, I don't expect them to understand every facet of the franchise, of whatever franchise it is. I think there's another Tomb Raider movie coming out as well. That one, to me, that's to be like, oh, it's like, what if Indiana Jones was a woman? It is basically what those are going for. And if you go from that perspective there, it seems, fairly accessible to me. I'm not sure exactly where I wanted to go with that particular comment, but it seems like with the original Pokemon movies, I think that a lot of the reviewers who were not familiar with the franchise, they weren't into video games or didn't have kids who were the right age or something like that. Like, some of them basically put down, I think Roger Ebert basically said, I'm sure there's people who like this. It's all Greek to me, something to that effect. And why he gave it a negative review, he says did not find it accessible, which, fine. I'm sure there are things like that. But with some of the other reviews, that were more, I had to rip into it a little more. It almost feels, it can come across like they were not just not interested in the franchise, but actually actively disinterested, was kind of the point I was making with some of this. And there are reviews that I think cross that line into territory. And at that point, it's like, well, you almost sound like you resented being assigned this. And, whatever like that. Like, I think those reviews are often honest. They honestly did not like the movie. but I think they also may have cheated themselves to some degree. And maybe they were in a headspace where they were so nauseated by the franchise in the case of the first couple Pokemon movies that like they couldn't step back there. But I don't know. That was a long hodgepodge of words there, Ann. I'm very sorry. But that was kind of the angle I was coming at this with. And, Smash Brothers is obviously, one reason I brought it on this one, besides the timing, is that Smash Brothers is a franchise where there are a number of franchises that people who are into even a large number of video games might not be familiar with the backstories of. They may have heard the name of it. I don't know a lot about Persona. I haven't played a lot of Dragon Quest or even that much Final Fantasy. But I don't know. How do you kind of approach? First of all, what do you have to say? What do you have any thoughts on my thing about some of the criticisms where it does sometimes cross that line and it comes into? It sounds like you actively were disinterested in the underlying franchise or something. Have you run into that?
Well, I mean, as I said, there's not a question here. Obviously, we all have run into it. Like, again, it's just a thing that happens. Like it happens with all sorts of things that later on, like it happened with the Star Wars prequels. It happened with a Goofy movie from Roger Ebert himself. Like, what's that line from Ratatouille from Anton Ego? Like, scathing criticism is fun to write and fun to read, but the sad truth we critics must face is that the average piece of junk is worth more than our criticism deigning it so. Like, people love to hate on things aggressively sometimes more than they love to defend something they actually like. And that's a sad truth. It's like it takes a lot more courage to come out and say, I like this thing that maybe only appeals to a niche audience. And again, there's not much commentary. It's a thing that happens. It's sad that it happens, but it absolutely happens.
I mean, I suppose, like I said, I think the media environment of the late 90s, early 2000s during the initial Pokemon fandom era is probably a little hard to understand. Go came somewhat close, the launch period of that, but even now it isn't quite what it was that. Even then, it wasn't quite what it was then. So, like I said, I say you read some of those reviews, it does feel like they're honestly nauseated by the franchise, and that did affect their enjoyment of the movie. And maybe but like, I'm just.
Yeah, no one is truly objective. Like, the fact is, if a person, like, critics are supposed to be giving their objective criticism, but the fact is, if they don't like something, like, they're going to have that bias coming in, and sometimes it's going to, as you say, make it sound like they actively hate the thing, they're not reporting on it objectively. And again, it sucks that happens, but we are, at the end of the day, only human, and we give into our vices.
Yeah, but I do think that, with the source material, I think some of this, like, when you have super successful, like, video game franchises, it seems, when they turn there, I was talking about, Tomb Raider, where that is, like, that seems like it ought to be fairly accessible to the general public because it is, like I said, it's basically female Indiana Jones. It's very clear what that's going into. With Pokemon, yeah, I think people felt like a desire, or, like, reviewers felt like they had to, like not that they had to understand, but like, do you know what I mean here? Like if they didn't get it, like all the little details, they were missing the point or something like that, or whatever. Like,
there definitely was in the past, especially like when we were growing up, a lot more of a monoculture and a lot more of an idea that a certain type of person was in power, usually a male gaze, and usually a straight orientation, and usually a white race.
Yeah,
and the idea that things didn't appeal to you meant that they were wrong. And I think we are moving into a world where, like, we cannot possibly have a monoculture if we tried. Like, right. Kids, on the playground, or adults around the water cooler, like, may talk about the number one show on their streaming service that their coworker has never heard of. So I think we are moving into a more of a potential acceptance of the idea that something may not be for me, but it may be for you. And not everything has to be for me. I think when you and I were growing up, that was like the idea that if it doesn't appeal to Roger Ebert, it must suck was downright, like, you know, the critics made the taste. Whereas now it's like, well, this might not be for him, but he may not know what he's talking about. Like, you know, the Black community loves this movie, kind of a thing.
I suppose.
That's much more acceptable.
Yeah, and sometimes, you know, but like going back to Five Nights at Freddy's, I had not played any of the games when I saw the first movie, and I actually agree with some of the movie critics' criticism of that movie. The pacing, especially in the first half or so, could certainly be better. But the underlying, like, it seems like sometimes they don't even get they have trouble approaching the underlying concept of the franchise and stuff like that. Which, like, with Five Nights at Freddy's, oh yeah, people find like animatronic animals or characters or stuff like that are like clowns. Some people find them funny, some people find them scary. And it's like, that seems pretty approachable. So that one, like, I agreed with their criticisms of the movie. This didn't bother me as much as it did there. You go to something like Pokemon, I think there is a cultural disconnect because I think a lot of movie reviewers, especially those not familiar with the franchise, probably didn't have much exposure to combat sports, which are a core part of the franchise and is what differentiates, going back to particularly the first movie, that's what differentiates the all-out war at the end of the film versus the stuff you see earlier. And like I think in that particular case, I think some reviewers, consciously or not, like I said, I think they were being honest, but I think some of them were looking for a gotcha. And in particular, the dub, which I think did actually work to put more distance between, you know, the organized battles and the all-out fight at the end, said, "Aha, I got you! Fighting can't be wrong because this is all about fighting." And it's like, you know, I think they were being honest with a lot of those things there, but it's just their mind clicked into that. So like that's where the sort of honest but not necessarily fair comes in there. And I do wonder about that. Versus, like I said, it's interesting trying to parse some of these criticisms. At least like with Smash Brothers, going back to that, you can play as a character you do know from a previous game, although they do tweak them every single time to add in new features. Like the Zelda in Ultimate is different, I believe, from like the Zelda in some of the previous games, who was based on, you know, they go from the adult Zelda in Ocarina of Time to the one from Link Between Worlds at some point, and so on and so forth. So they do play around with that. And the Link in this one is from Breath of the Wild, of course. So even if you encounter characters you're not familiar with, because, you know, going back to Pokemon, when the first Smash Brothers came out, Pokemon, like, it had been in Japan for about 3 years at that point, since early '96. But in the West, it was a brand new franchise. It had only been around for like 6 months in the West. And so Pokemon was like that for a lot of folks who played the original Smash Brothers. They were aware of it by name, but not much else. I don't know. Hopefully this segment edits into something coherent. I'm not sure it will. If you got to the end of this and it still has it, I'm sorry. But it seemed very relevant given the game we were discussing and, of course, recent history. But if you think you want to toss your own hat into the ring about sort of this apparent, you know, how do you approach a new franchise that you haven't seen before that you might be interested in from an adapted work rather than from its native content, is sort of what I was going for here. You can always drop us a line, pokepress@gmail.com. You can give a comment on one of these videos, or you can give us a comment on social media, Pokepress on Blue Sky. All right, so we're going to get into the side games released in the Sword and Shield era. Now, one thing to note going forward, you notice that we've been doing these special episodes between generations. We're probably going to start peppering them in between regular episodes as we are getting very close to the current day. And Anne does not have a Switch 2 yet, so if we plow through and get to Picopia, we have done games we haven't played before, but
Let's play.
We'd like to space things out a little bit more. So our next one is the first side game of the Sword and Shield era, and that is Pokemon Cafe Remix. This is a mobile/Switch game, which I did play a little bit of, but haven't touched for a while. It's the latest Genius Sonority puzzle game, and it is still getting updates every now and again. We'll see if they come up with something new in the near future, but another Tsukasa Tawada game as far as the music, so I'm sure we'll have plenty of good stuff to pick out there. And did you ever get a chance to play Cafe Remix?
I did. I've not picked it up in a long time though, so I remember it being very cozy.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those. It's a touchscreen based game, so there's a lot of that in there. But we'll definitely have a fun time discussing it. Until then, Anne, thank you very much for being on.
Thank you.
This has been Stephen Reich. All right, folks, thanks. All right, let me grab a quick bit of water, but I think we can go into our game discussion relatively quickly.
Awesome.
We do have a fair amount to talk about because I think there is some interesting. There is one new Pokemon character, of course, Incineroar. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk a fair bit about the spirit battles and a little bit about the competitive scene. I don't play competitively, but I do go to a lot of competitions for Smash Brothers to observe. So I have a fair amount of experience watching some of that there.
And just to lower everybody's expectations, he might be able to talk competitively. I play with my friends on a couch and I button smash. So that is the disparate levels that we are bringing to this discussion.
Like I said, I don't play competitively, but I do watch a fair amount of competitive play and have a fair amount of experience there. But leave a little pause and do our game introduction for that segment. All right. Well, we had a lot to say about the music of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. But there's also the underlying game. We did mention a little bit about that here and there, but honestly, mechanically, it's not super different from Smash 4. There's not a major new tweak to the gameplay. Some of the characters have a lot of little tweaks here and there with them. And there are a bunch of new ones. There are a bunch of new ones in the base game, as well as a bunch of new DLC characters. Sort of the big thing with this one, of course, is they tried to bring back everything they could. All the characters there, not every stage, but every character from a prior Smash Brothers game is there. It'll be interesting to see what we do next. But the new Pokemon character that we get in there is Incineroar from Sun and Moon. Of course, the fully evolved form of Litten. Very popular and sometimes somewhat controversial as possibly being overpowered in the games. Also, I think a fairly popular character in the competitive Smash Brothers scene. There's a fair amount of it. But it comes in. It does pretty much what you expect. It has a lot of wrestling type moves, which is sort of its thing in there. Any thoughts on Incineroar? I haven't played a whole lot with it, I'll be honest. I mostly just Samus is my main character, regular Samus.
Yeah,
is the one I gravitated for ever since the first Smash Brothers. I've been pretty consistent in there. What are you? But do you have any thoughts on Incineroar?
I mean, like, it is a Pokemon I love, but as you say, it is not one of the ones I usually go to when I'm playing. In fact, none of the Pokemon characters are when I sit down to play Smash typically. Pikachu sometimes. But yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's so much variety. I use Mewtwo sometimes, ever since Melee, where it's been... Well, it wasn't in Brawl. It was added as a DLC. I think you unlock it normally in this one. But... Yeah, and there's also, let's see, I don't remember, I couldn't even really quite tell you which Pokemon stages, if any, are new. I mean, we still got the Kalos ones, but I think at least some of those were in Smash 4. So those are sort of the big ones. Really, mechanically, there's no big story mode. There is a single-player mode, of course, but no Subspace Emissary equivalent. Well, there sort of is. We'll talk about that, actually.
Board. Yeah.
There's no board game mode. Really, what they actually have in this one is the spirit mechanic, which are these things you can... there's a big explorable, multifaceted map mode you can go through where you have all these spirit battles. And the way it works is that they're all, based on a character or item or something from one of the associated games in the series that's represented in Smash Brothers. And the way it works is you'll have some sort of opponent, which is one of the playable characters in the game. And what they'll do is they'll change its color scheme, they'll change its its strategy a little bit, what moves it uses. Sometimes they'll shrink it or grow it or stuff like that, and maybe they'll give it an item or stuff like that to mimic that specific spirit character. And they're never exact matches, but it is interesting to see how they do all this stuff and how they try to approximate with the characters they have to go there. Basically, these spirits are sort of a substitute for trophies in and of themselves because they didn't like having to make 3D models of everything. They wanted to do more, so this is sort of the compromise they came to. What do you guys think of spirit battles overall, Anne? Have you done too many of them, or?
Well, no, because I've not. Again, I don't own this game. This is a game I play at parties, and kind of historically, that's always been how I prefer to engage with Smash Bros. It's a game for me and my friends. Like, I don't really care much about any of the solo player stuff. So I've not personally played a lot of Spirit. I've watched a few people occasionally, but mostly online because, again, when my friends are around and they've got the Super Smash, we're all playing just to brawl against each other. So I'm aware of some of their effects and like how you get some of them, but like I remember watching online somebody trying to get the unknown one, and that was pretty cool. But like, yeah, it's not something that like has really mattered to me much personally.
Yeah, Anne does not actually own a copy on her Switch of this, so she only plays it with other folks anyway, which makes a lot of sense. I do have a copy of it, and I did play through the entire Spirit mode, which has a very loose story. It's not trying to be as deep as Subspace Emissary. You just go from place to place and battle different spirits on different places there. And there's like a rock, paper, scissors system with the spirits, and some of them have equipable slots. You can use these in versus mode if you turn them on. They're not using competitive play, though, for what that's worth. I did want to call out, there are obviously some Pokemon ones, both ones based on Pokemon and also ones that use Pokemon to represent other video game characters. There was a couple I wanted to call out. One of them is Mouser, who, speaking of the Mario Galaxy movie, we do get to see there is a character from, well, originally Doki Doki Panic, but Super Mario Bros. 2 US, who is well known for throwing bombs around. And for that one, of course, they used Pikachu, and it starts with a bomb, and more bombs spawn on the field as the battle goes on. So that's kind of cute there. And then they edited its AI. There's some other ones that Pokemon appear in as characters, like I think Fei Long from Street Fighter. That spirit battle uses Lucario. Slippy Toad is another one that uses Greninja and Fox from Star Fox, of course, as a two-person team there. So that's interesting. But as far as one of the Pokemon ones I absolutely wanted to talk about is the Latias and Latios one. So that one, they use 2 Charizard in that one. And you actually get to, the fight takes place. They also work the stage into this sometimes. You get to work on a part of the Isle Delfino stage. If you can put all of those together, you might realize that, yes, this is, I don't think they've ever verbally confirmed it, but this is very clearly a re-representation of the 5th movie, Pokemon Heroes, in Smash Brothers. They very creatively mixed those elements to make that happen, which is really neat. Now, they do actually spawn the Latias and Latios Pokeball right away, but then you actually have to fight the Charizard that are in there. It's one of the tougher battles. It has a high 3 or 4 stars on there, and so it's a little bit difficult. But they did an interesting job of thematically going in there, and the Charizard have extra speed added to be more like the super fast Latias and Latios. So they try to work that kind of stuff in there. So it's interesting seeing how they try to approximate this, and it'll be interesting to see if they bring this back in a future installment. Anne, any other thoughts on spirits? I know you don't have a ton of experience, but I think it's an interesting facet and an interesting way of doing, also kind of a replacement for event battles in there. So it was kind of an interesting way to migrate all that stuff.
For sure. It's interesting. I imagine it plays heavily into the competitive scene.
No, they don't use spirits in competitive Melee or in competitive Ultimate.
I would have thought
you can turn them on in versus mode, and there's a whole like rock paper scissors system in there, and there's also like one neutral. and they give you different abilities and stuff, but those are definitely not used in competitive play.
Really? Oh, how fascinating.
Yeah, as far as competitive play goes, well, if you're wondering what the controversial character this time around is, it's Steve, the player character from Minecraft, has been on and off banned. One interesting thing is Nintendo, they've always had some sort of event for these, but they're doing more of their own competitions for this. But the competitive scene seems to be relatively healthy. I do go to see tournaments every so often. There's a group, I don't play competitively myself, but there is a group that meets pretty much every Monday at a game store near here that I do sometimes sit around and watch and accomplish other things during. There's also pretty much always a Smash Brothers tournament at a major anime or gaming convention. Unfortunately, did not get a chance to hang around the one at recording this the weekend after the Midwest Gaming Classic. I didn't get a chance to go there, unfortunately, or go to that tournament there. But that's still going on. It'll be interesting to see what they do next. We're recording this about 6 months after Kirby Air Riders, which was, oh gosh, I can't remember the guy's name, Sakurai's, which was Sakurai's last major project. That was sort of, I think, Nintendo's give him something to do in between Smash Brothers. So we'll be interested to see if they make Ultimate V2. This looks like a further expansion of Ultimate, or if they decide to do something from the ground up, or if he does another side project first. It's not obvious to me what they would do next. So we don't have there's not like a specific patch for the Switch 2, so that may be the first thing they do there. I don't know. But I don't know. Anne, do you have any thoughts on the future of this series, since this is the most recent entry?
Oh, let's see. It's kind of boggled my mind thus far, like just how many franchises they've been able to bring in, and just because the sheer amount of licensing deals going on, like they're bringing in stuff that's no longer necessarily associated with Nintendo. At this point, I don't know what the future is. They've already surpassed all expectations. But I kind of think, like, for me, as someone who, again, just plays casually with friends, just, beating up on each other, that is the part of the game that speaks the most to me. And that is the part of the game that has not changed a ton. Like, almost the more you mess with it, the more annoying it becomes. Like, the harder it is to just pick up a controller and play, like, I think is to the company's detriment. So it's like, I don't know how much more you can improve upon perfection. It's kind of like, I just expect each subsequent release to just have, like, again, more characters, but I don't expect them to dramatically reinvent the wheel, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I trust that they can come up with ideas that you and I can't. Sometimes It's easy to see where a game can go next, and sometimes it isn't. And we've been surprised by video game developers numerous times in the past.
This is true.
I did want to mention though about third-party characters. Nintendo was able to cut a deal with Microsoft, who owns Rare now, so they could bring in Banjo-Kazooie, which is fun there. If they ever manage to make peace with Sony owns the Lemmings franchise, which is a character I have very much wanted in Smash Brothers, because I think it would be a very natural fit with all the different skills you can give the Lemmings in the games. Mm-hmm. And Sony has not done squat with that IP for a very long time, so maybe they should just sell it. But you are familiar with the Lemmings franchise, right?
I'm actually not.
Oh, this is a franchise in the early 90s. It started on the Commodore Amiga and was like that Tetris and Street Fighter in that era, was ported to everything.
Okay.
But they're sort of loosely based on the actual creatures, but they have like blue outfits and green hair and stuff, and your goal is to give them various skills that they use to get them as many as you can to the exit of the level. Because otherwise they'll just walk back and forth and off cliffs and stuff like that. Yes, it does feed into that unwarranted stereotype. But because they have all these different skills, it would make them very good for a game like Smash Brothers. But Sony purchased the rights in the late 90s or early 2000s and has made one or two things, but hasn't done a lot else with the franchise in a long time. Gotcha. So that's my 2 cents about if we got a Sony franchise, a Sony-owned franchise into Smash somehow, that would be the one. But
Not a bad pull.
all right, we can go ahead and I think stop the recording there. All right, so yeah, so hopefully that discussion segment we can that it was not as tightly plotted as I thought it would work out to be.
It's all good. We'll get it there in the end.
Yeah, we can usually it'll hopefully come together in the edit. But yeah, if you have comments on any of that stuff, let's see what else has happened. Well, I didn't bother with the Target thing this weekend for Pokemon. They dropped none of the items were really anything I was terribly interested in. I have enough Pokemon apparel already. So the in-store thing dropped yesterday, and then the digital one dropped today. There were some people who were obviously getting stuff through resale yesterday. There were a lot more today, and that only lasted the inventory only lasted a few minutes online. So we'll see where that winds up. I am, like I said, going to be at the Pokemon Go Fest in Chicago on Saturday afternoon, although I will be out and about, at least on Saturday, the rest of the day, and then possibly on Sunday. I still have to book my travel arrangements for that.
We'll have a
And
cool
then,
time.
and I will also be at NAIC in New Orleans. I have that all booked up. Hotel, airfare, and the event itself. Worlds, I still don't know. I don't think they've started sending out the full weekend interest list stuff. I haven't heard of anyone getting those on there. So I don't know about that. And then eventually, if I don't get a full weekend pass, I'll have to try and get a single day pass for San Francisco. So we'll see how that one turns out. I also I'm not doing it the weekend of the Chicago Go event because it'll be mild, but I do want to try and get to the Chicago Field Museum, which is doing a Pokemon exhibit.
Cool.
I had when they announced some of the other stuff, it's like, oh, the concert is in like London and LA. Well, I guess everything can't be in Chicago. Just a couple hours away from me, I lucked out with like the Stern Pinball and the Field Museum and the Go Fest in Chicago. So, can't have everything. So, all right. Well, Ann, anything else you wanted to say before we wrap up this live stream?
No, I think I'm good. Everybody have a lovely weekend.
Yep. All right. Thanks.
I have to